Life is so much more than a diagnosis. It's about sharing time with those you love, hanging with friends who lift you up, and experiencing all those moments that bring you joy. All hits, no skips. Learn more about Kisqali Ribociclib 200 milligrams at KISQALI.com and talk to your doctor to see if Kisqali is right for you. So long live singing to the oldies, jamming out to something new, and everything in between.
A small community is in turmoil after the sudden disappearance of 24-year-old student Aniya Mack. Aniya, a brilliant student with solid family values, goes missing, and her loved ones and detectives search for her. What happens when love turns fatal? Come with us as we unveil the gripping and emotional story of Aniya Mack. What happens when love becomes fatal? This is the Fatal Attraction Podcast with Thou Shall Not Kill.
She was a beautiful, brilliant college student.
She was called to great things.
She had a very bright future ahead.
He was her perfect match.
He certainly had drive.
He was working, he was thriving.
They really shined as a couple.
Until she suddenly disappeared.
Nobody had heard from her.
It's just like, wait a minute, something's wrong.
The search for the missing woman uncovers a dark secret.
He was a prominent minister in the community.
He gave her a card.
He paid for this and he paid for that.
Let me show you.
There were these graphic text messages.
It was just a whirlwind of a case.
And the final act will take everyone by surprise.
That day will be etched in my mind forever.
We never saw that coming.
How in the world is that even doable?
Stop! Just do it easy!
June 26, 2018. It's a little after 6 on Tuesday evening when Loretta Rankin Bailey calls her daughter, Aniya Mack, who lives in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
She was a student at Western Michigan University.
Her and her mother were always on the phone, always talking.
But it has been more than 48 hours since Loretta last talked to her daughter.
Her mother hadn't heard from her on Sunday, which was typical for her to call.
Hi, this is Aniya. Can't get to the phone right now. Leave your number and I'll call you back.
And now she was starting to get a little worried.
Aniya, honey, call me when you get this.
Aniya's mother is still leaving a voicemail when another call comes through.
Oh, hey, Jared.
It isn't her daughter on the phone. It's Aniya's close friend, Jerron White.
Her circle here was very small, but it was very much like family. We were all mutual friends. And so we would care for one another and look out for one another.
Sorry to bother you, Mel. I was wondering, have you heard from Aniya?
No, not in a few days. I was hoping this was her calling.
Jerron said he hasn't talked to Aniya either.
That wasn't like her not to respond.
According to Jerron, that isn't the most troubling thing either.
I tried calling her at work this morning. They said she missed her shift.
What? Aniya's mother was starting to really panic. She was a no-show for work, and one of her best friends can't get a hold of her.
It was completely abnormal that she didn't go to work.
She loved her job, so we just knew something was wrong.
For Aniya Mack, family was number one.
Her mother and her were very close. Her sisters, her brothers, her immediate family was her heart.
The 24-year-old was also adored by her friends.
She has lots of friends, is very active socially.
Aniya was small, but she was a giant. We used to always say that. People knew who she was.
People just said she had an aura or a glow about her that permeated a room.
Her personality was out loud. There was never a time where we gathered where Aniya was not dancing, Aniya was not singing.
And she did that just to make people happy and to make herself happy. And that was just kind of the light she radiated throughout her life.
Aniya's style always turned heads, too.
Aniya was always very put together. She always had on her makeup, her lashes. She always had her hair done. Aniya was that girl that most females looked at and wanted to be.
Aniya had beauty and brains. The psychology major maintained a 3.8 GPA at Western Michigan.
Aniya was brilliant. She thrived academically.
Her studies at Western Michigan University were leading her in a path towards helping children.
She was very driven to see kids succeed. She wanted to see children who had maybe had troubled upbringings or who had emotional or physical impairments be able to live healthy and productive lives.
She was described as somebody who had a real passion for helping others.
It was a passion grounded in Aniya's faith.
She had a huge spiritual component to herself.
She always talked about, y'all better get right with God. She believed that he was the way.
Since moving to Kalamazoo to attend college, Aniya had become very involved in a local church.
The church is a landmark in Kalamazoo, one of, if not, I believe, the oldest African-American founded church in Kalamazoo history.
There's a large number of worshipers there, a big choir.
It is a very active church.
Especially under the leadership of its current pastor, Thomas Mayfield.
He was very much a leader in the community.
He's very outgoing. He's very charismatic. He's just a guy who's got a huge personality.
He was well-loved by everybody in that congregation.
Beautiful sermon today, Pastor Mayfield.
Thank you so much, Aniya. I really appreciate that.
A key member of the congregation, Aniya was every bit as beloved as the minister.
She was a member of the church choir.
Every time that there was an opportunity or something going on at church, Aniya was there.
A welcoming community wasn't all Aniya found at her new church, though. In the spring of 2017, she met a young parishioner named Donovan Lewis.
I hope you enjoyed the service.
I sure did. And your solo was beautiful.
Really? Thank you.
Anytime.
Aniya appreciated Donovan's smoothness. He was smooth. He's a pretty cool guy.
Donovan attended Kalamazoo Valley Community College, was an athlete, played basketball there.
Aniya may initially have been drawn to Donovan's athleticism, but she soon realized there was so much more to this young man.
He had a promising future in school. He was a hard worker.
He was really one of those guys that was really driven to achieve his goals.
Aniya would always say that I know what he has the potential to become.
It wasn't long before Aniya and Donovan started dating.
Once she started to talk to him, things progressed.
They were both young people with their eye on the future.
They would allow themselves to mutually push one another. They would travel, they would go and do different things, different adventures and excursions and things like that.
Most of all, they shared a strong passion for one another.
That fire burns pretty hot when you're 24 and 25 years old.
By the summer of 2018, there appeared to be no limit for this young couple.
Donovan had completed his associate's degree and got a job coaching youth basketball at the local YMCA.
Aniya had one semester left at Western, and she was excited about it.
But now, Aniya has missed 2 days of work, and her friends and family are worried.
She's missing shifts at her dream job. At that point, it's just like, wait a minute, something's wrong.
That Tuesday night, Aniya's mother makes a call to her daughter's boyfriend, Donovan Lewis.
Hey, Donovan, have you seen Aniya? I've been trying to get a hold of her.
Well, I was over there Saturday.
Although their relationship had gotten pretty serious, Donovan still lived with his grandmother.
I did talk to her on Sunday, and I left her a couple voicemails, but she hasn't called me back.
He has not seen or heard from her.
However, he does have one potentially helpful piece of information.
She said she was meeting with Reverend Mayfield at the church.
Stay tuned as we return to the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Raise a spoon to Grandma, who always took all the hungry cousins to McDonald's for McNuggets and the Play Slide. Have something sweet in her honor. Come to McDonald's and treat yourself to the Grandma McFlurry today. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Life is so much more than a diagnosis. It's about sharing time with those you love, hanging with friends who lift you up, and experiencing all those moments that bring you joy. All hits, no skips. Learn more about Kisqali Ribociclib 200 milligrams at KISQALI.com and talk to your doctor to see if Kisqali is right for you. So long live singing to the oldies, jamming out to something new, and everything in between.
For 24-year-old college senior Aniya Mack, everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place.
She was getting ready to graduate. She had got her dream job. She was doing everything that she wanted to do.
Aniya had also found love with 25-year-old Donovan Lewis.
He and Aniya had been dating for some time.
She's seen the fact that he was driven. She's seen his potential. And she was willing to be his encouragement and be his supporter.
But now, on the evening of June 26, 2018, it has been more than 48 hours since anyone has seen or heard from Aniya, and her friends and family are growing concerned.
They had been trying to reach her by her cell phone, and they hadn't been getting any response.
This is not like her. We talked every day, multiple times a day.
She'd also missed work.
We realized something's not right.
That night, after talking to Donovan, Aniya's mother reaches out to the pastor of her daughter's church, Thomas Mayfield.
Hello?
According to Donovan, Aniya said she was meeting with the pastor at the church that Sunday.
Reverend Mayfield, we haven't met. This is Aniya
Mack's mother.
She had a close relationship with the pastor there.
And when Aniya's mom explained what's going on, Pastor Mayfield seemed quite concerned.
Is there anything I can do?
I don't know.
She seemed fine on Sunday.
Pastor Mayfield said he met with Aniya about an upcoming choir performance.
And you say no one has seen her since?
No.
The pastor promised to spread the word around the congregation that Aniya was missing.
I just pray we can find her.
Okay, thank you, Reverend.
After talking to the minister, Aniya's mother calls the Kalamazoo Police Department and reports her daughter missing.
Pretty normal that they didn't call us within the first 2 to 3 days, very likely because they were trying to locate her themselves, but they were unable to do so. So they gave us a call, hoping that we could help.
No one believed anything was afoot or anything nefarious had happened. They were just trying to find her.
It wasn't, oh my gosh, we're worried that something terrible has happened. It was we're concerned about her. Can you check up on this?
If you hear anything, let me know. Thank you.
Once the missing persons report is filed, the Kalamazoo police dispatch officers to Aniya's apartment.
It was more of a welfare check than anything else. Police were simply walking to her apartment to knock on her door.
There's no answer.
At that point, the police decided to contact the building superintendent to let them into the apartment.
At first glance, everything appears normal.
When they really started to look a little bit further, search a little deeper, they were able to locate some blood in the apartment on the wall that's right outside of Aniya's room.
Florida Station.
Upon finding the blood, officers contact the department's homicide unit.
They weren't sure how old the blood was or if it was Aniya's, but given the circumstances, they have to assume they're looking at a possible homicide.
When homicide detectives arrive on the scene, they uncover more signs of foul play.
They were also able to obtain some blood stains in the carpet.
It was also clear to detectives that someone attempted to clean up the blood.
By utilizing our blue light, we were able to see quite a bit of cleaning.
There was a lot of bleach and other types of things that were used to clean up.
Detectives send the carpet off to the crime lab, in hopes that testing can determine if the blood is Aniya's.
Crime scene investigators were able to cut out the portion of the carpet where the blood was, and then also cut out the padding from the carpet.
In the meantime, detectives are already investigating Aniya's disappearance as a possible homicide.
Aniya was not at the home. Aniya was not with any of her family. Aniya was not anywhere that we knew of at that point.
But what had really happened to her? Besides the blood on the carpet, the scene offers a few other clues.
It looked as if Aniya had someone over prior to her disappearance.
In the apartment, it seemed as if there had been quite a bit of drinking going on. There were bottles of many different types of alcoholic beverage all around the bedroom, as well as in the living room of the apartment.
Hoping to learn who might have been in the apartment with Aniya, detectives start reaching out to her neighbors.
We were canvassing the apartment just to ask if they heard anything, ask if they knew anything about it.
Several neighbors mentioned that Aniya has a boyfriend named Donovan Lewis.
None of the neighbors suspected Donovan had anything to do with Aniya's disappearance. They all said the couple seemed happy.
There had been no indications of problems.
There wasn't a history of police calls or anything like that.
Despite that, the following morning, detectives bring Donovan in for questioning.
He'd be one of the first people you'd want to talk to because of his relationship with her.
Thanks for coming in to talk to us today.
No problem. Do y'all have any idea where Aniya is?
Not exactly.
When detectives told Donovan about the blood in Aniya's apartment, he was obviously upset.
He was extremely distraught. He appeared to be in a lot of shock.
But Donovan has an even bigger shock for the detectives.
Y'all need to talk to Reverend Mayfield.
And when detectives asked why, Donovan dropped a bombshell.
He's convinced that there's a sexual relationship between Miss Mack and the Reverend.
As stories begin to unravel, detectives receive a breakthrough. Stay tuned as we return to the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Raise a spoon to Grandma, who always took all the hungry cousins to McDonald's for McNuggets and the Play Slide. Have something sweet in her honor. Come to McDonald's and treat yourself to the Grandma McFlurry today. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Life is so much more than a diagnosis. It's about sharing time with those you love, hanging with friends who lift you up, and experiencing all those moments that bring you joy. All hits, no skips. Learn more about Kisqali Ribociclib 200 milligrams at KISQALI.com and talk to your doctor to see if Kisqali is right for you. So long live singing to the oldies, jamming out to something new, and everything in between.
Detectives investigating the disappearance of 24-year-old Aniya Mack have just heard an explosive claim from her boyfriend, Donovan Lewis.
Donovan told detectives that Aniya had been having an affair with the pastor of her church, Thomas Mayfield.
He was someone who was well known to everyone in the community.
He was actually a prominent member of the group of religious leaders from all the churches that are on the north side of Kalamazoo.
He has the direct line to one of the chiefs of police to share his concerns and thoughts about the north side community.
Since the pastor is such a prominent member of the community, the detectives tread carefully.
How long has that been going on?
I don't know exactly.
Donovan says that Aniya's dedication to the church had intensified.
There were times when he wanted to spend the day with her or hang out with her where she would say, nope, it's my choir day, I'm going in.
The Reverend started coming around a lot too.
To the apartment?
Yeah.
At the time, Aniya didn't have a car, so the pastor would often give her rides.
She said it was for choir practice and stuff, but I don't know.
It seemed like she was spending too much time with the pastor.
Donovan says that the pastor had eventually stopped giving Aniya rides, but the reason made him even more suspicious.
She had an automobile that the pastor had given her.
Donovan said Thomas gave Aniya money, too.
He was financially supporting Aniya to a certain extent.
He had helped pay for rent. I would personally have been suspicious.
Did you say something to her about it?
Yeah, but she said it wasn't anything.
She kind of blew him off. She indicated to him that he was making too much out of it. There was nothing going on.
Donovan said he wanted to believe her, but he kept uncovering evidence that Aniya and Thomas was up to something.
He had found out that she went on a trip with him down south, and allegedly it had been that the choir was going. But he had found out that she went with him and that the choir had not gone.
But according to Donovan, he'd found the most damning proof while going through Aniya's phone.
He had found pictures and text messages on her phone. A sexually explicit picture from the Reverend.
There was texts from the pastor. I'm going to give you the best you've ever had.
You're sure that was from the Reverend?
Let me show you.
Using his phone, Donovan had actually snapped pictures of the text from Thomas Mayfield.
Okay.
He had a copy of it. Detectives saw that text.
Do the explicit messages prove the pastor did something to Aniya? Or did Donovan just give himself a motive?
This could have been something that sparked from jealousy and kind of escalated from there.
Donovan says that's not the case.
He said that they had actually worked through it and they were trying to rebuild their relationship.
That's not all he said, though.
She didn't want anyone to know.
About what?
Her and Reverend Mayfield.
What makes you say that?
He threatened her.
He was a prominent member of the community, so he did have a lot to lose if word got back to the congregation.
Donovan's story sounds plausible to detectives, but it also puts them in an uncomfortable position.
He is somebody that I knew personally before this incident happened.
He was someone that we would utilize as a communicator between us and the community.
Even with the text messages Donovan had, detectives were hesitant to just haul him in for questioning.
Hoping to further corroborate Donovan's story, detectives impound Aniya's car, which is still parked outside her apartment.
When detectives ran the registration, it leads back to the pastor, Thomas Mayfield.
The vehicle is in his wife's name.
We've confirmed a lot of factors consistent with Donovan's statement and accusations.
There was something going on that involved the Reverend.
Because I really need that.
The question was, how far would he go to keep a secret?
As stories begin to unravel, detectives receive a breakthrough. Stay tuned as we return to the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Detectives investigating the disappearance of 24-year-old Aniya Mack have reason to believe the missing woman has been having an affair with Thomas Mayfield, the pastor of her church.
The minister had apparently been sending Aniya explicit text messages.
He had provided her with resources, provided her with a car.
It's not entirely clear if Aniya and Thomas Mayfield were actually in a physical relationship, but it appeared as if something was going on.
It was pretty clear that they were having an inappropriate relationship.
If the details got out, they could be very damaging to the pastor.
He was a very prominent member in the community.
He doesn't want to be cast in the light of having had an affair with a much younger member of his church, given his position and being married.
Does that mean Thomas Mayfield had something to do with Aniya's disappearance? Hoping for some answers, detectives bring him in for questioning.
Thanks for coming in to talk to us today, Reverend.
Anytime. Always happy to help the police.
He had been a community partner with my department. He was definitely someone that we trusted.
We're looking into Aniya Mack's disappearance. We just have a few questions for you.
Certainly. I really do hope you find her. She's been a real joy to have in our church. Her and Donovan.
The pastor had been someone who had counseled both of them at various points.
When the questions turn to his relationship with Aniya, Thomas Mayfield becomes defensive.
He denied any inappropriate relationship with Mack.
The pastor has an explanation for all the support he's given Aniya.
He said, yes, she had a car, but that's not unusual. We have several cars that we provide to members of our church that are in need.
He also claimed that the money he gave Aniya for rent was entirely innocent.
He said, we have a big church, we have lots of members, we have access to resources that we use to help those members.
He was just trying to say this was just a normal relationship that he had with a parishioner.
But he could not explain why there were these graphic text messages in her phone.
You can imagine where it goes. Other people have access to my phone.
When detectives ask Thomas Mayfield about what happened to Aniya,
You can check with her.
he's quick to point the finger at Donovan Lewis.
If you want to know what happened, you ought to talk to her boyfriend.
He said Aniya was having problems with Donovan. Donovan was trying to harm Aniya. And he was basically trying to just put himself as an advocate, that he was there for Aniya and he was trying to help her.
The pastor also offers up an alibi for the afternoon that Aniya disappeared.
He said he had met briefly with Aniya at church and spent the rest of the day with his wife.
You can check it with her.
With nothing to hold him on, detectives let Thomas Mayfield go. But on his way out, he does something that leaves investigators scratching their heads.
Can I get my car back?
He tried to get the police to return the car he'd loaned to Aniya.
But we did not release it to him at that point. As a rule, we do not release evidence in a homicide until pretty much after trial.
They were in the middle of a possible homicide, and the pastor was just worried about getting his car back. It just struck the detectives as callous.
Detectives will need to confirm Thomas Mayfield's alibi.
But first, they pulled Donovan's police record, looking for anything to back up the pastor's claim that Donovan had been abusing Aniya.
The investigators come up empty-handed.
He didn't have any history of violence, any history of felonies, any significant misdemeanors or criminal history. He had one very minor driving kind of offense.
It was driving without a license, and there was nothing else really there.
Detectives also subpoena Aniya's phone records to see if there's more to her relationship with her pastor than Thomas Mayfield admitted.
As an investigator, you need to make sure and do a thorough investigation and look at every angle. So pulling those phone records enabled me to look at who she was speaking with before Sunday.
Then, just before detectives head out the door to follow up with Thomas Mayfield's wife about his alibi, they get an urgent call from one of Aniya's friends.
The friend told detectives about a strange post that Donovan had just made on social media.
And the contents of the post could be the breakthrough detectives have been waiting for.
There was this Facebook post cryptically saying, he was sorry and he hoped everyone could forgive him.
It was an apology. It was a cryptic apology to all his friends.
But detectives wondered, was it also a confession?
As stories begin to unravel, detectives receive a breakthrough. Stay tuned as we return to the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Raise a spoon to Grandma, who always took all the hungry cousins to McDonald's for McNuggets and the Play Slide. Have something sweet in her honor. Come to McDonald's and treat yourself to the Grandma McFlurry today. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Life is so much more than a diagnosis. It's about sharing time with those you love, hanging with friends who lift you up, and experiencing all those moments that bring you joy. All hits, no skips. Learn more about Kisqali Ribociclib 200 milligrams at KISQALI.com and talk to your doctor to see if Kisqali is right for you. So long live singing to the oldies, jamming out to something new, and everything in between.
In the early morning hours of Thursday, June 28, 2018, 4 days after his girlfriend Aniya Mack disappeared, Donovan Lewis has made a cryptic post on social media.
To the detectives working the case, it looks suspiciously like a confession.
Donovan Lewis posted on his Facebook page, "I apologize for anybody who looked up to me and loved me."
He puts on Facebook that he's sorry for what he did and he had to do it.
After reading what he wrote, detectives go looking for Donovan.
They were knocking on his door, and Donovan came walking out and just said, "Arrest me."
Just take me in. We'll talk about it on the way.
Just tell me now.
Kill my girl.
6116, can you come to the apartment, please? Wrong boyfriend. He's reporting at 235.
Right from the beginning, he says, I killed her.
You have the right to be inside. Make a mistake for one.
At the station, detectives hustle Donovan into the interview room.
Mr. Lewis waived his Miranda rights, so he's willing to talk with us. And he was pretty quick to want to tell us how the crime was executed.
I went over there Sunday afternoon.
He says they were just hanging out drinking.
This fit with the bottles that detectives found in the apartment.
Then, while intoxicated, Donovan revealed what he'd learned about Aniya and the pastor.
He had confronted her about the messages between her and the Reverend.
I mean, come on now. So what is this?
He showed her a picture he had taken of the text.
Don't tell me it's nothing.
He was angry, obviously. He felt like he had been betrayed.
Stop lying to me!
He describes having lost control at that point.
At that point, there was no stopping Donovan's rage.
He decided that he was going to kill her.
How'd you do it?
I just... I did it.
How?
We really had to ask him the question, make him focus.
He was very detached as he narrated these events, as if he was trying to recall how it happened.
Donovan tells detectives that while Aniya lay helpless, he'd gone into the kitchen and grabbed a knife.
He cut her throat. Cut it so deep that she essentially bled out.
Donovan says it was only then that he realized what he had done.
He had been raised in a good family from the way in which he described it.
It's not like he didn't know what he did was wrong.
He never called police. He didn't call for help. He hurt her and let her die.
He grabbed some plastic bags, covered up her face, covered up her hands and her arms.
Then he stuffed Aniya's body into a suitcase.
She was small enough to actually fit in a suitcase.
After cleaning up the scene, Donovan had gotten rid of Aniya's body.
He borrowed his mother's minivan. He put the suitcase in the back, and he drove it to a creek on the outskirts of town.
After he killed her and discarded her and buried her in the waterway, he went about his life. He goes to work. He visits his family.
Donovan also lied to police.
Y'all need to talk to Reverend Mayfield.
But eventually, a guilty conscience led Donovan to post the cryptic apology on social media.
He actually was a person that had a conscience.
I think that's why he confessed so readily, so completely.
However, there is still one more thing that the detectives need from Donovan.
I asked him if he would take us and show us where he had put her.
Donovan agrees, and the next morning, he rides with detectives out to the creek where he disposed of Aniya's body.
He had a hard time remembering initially when we got out there because there's a lot of marsh area and it all looks the same.
Eventually, he directs detectives to a bridge over the creek.
We called for our rescue boat, and they brought our boat out, and Donovan kind of directed the boat from the bridge as to where we would find Aniya.
After several minutes of probing around in the murky water, detectives dragged the suitcase to the surface.
It was a big suitcase. It's one moment you never forget, that's for sure. Locating her in that condition.
No decomposition had started.
The water and the cold mud packed around the suitcase had preserved her body.
News of the identity of Aniya's killer is almost as shocking as the fact that she's been murdered.
I received numerous messages about his good character and how unbelievable this was. What demon he had inside him is not a demon that anybody had ever seen in him before.
Friends and family said, this was not something we ever expected.
But what really gets people talking is the motive behind Aniya's murder.
The allegations that Aniya had been having an affair with Thomas Mayfield shocked the community.
This turned into a big story. First, because it was a murder, and second, because it was salacious, and the media had something to write about, and everybody had something to gossip about.
But when detectives dig into the allegations, there is no proof of a sexual relationship.
Aniya would confide in me regularly. And so I wholeheartedly know that there was never an intimate interaction that had taken place. What I can tell you was that there were inappropriate advances made on his part, things that should not have been said in the context of a relationship between a member and a pastor.
But we never discovered anything that would establish a real, viable affair or relationship.
Which means the motive behind Aniya's murder was nothing but a tragic misunderstanding.
He did what he did because of him being jealous, because of him feeling as if he had lost, but he formulated a response off of inaccurate information.
But no matter what triggered it, there was no denying what Donovan had done. On June 29th, prosecutors officially charged Donovan with first-degree murder.
The intentional act was going to the kitchen, getting a knife, and then cutting her.
That, in our mind, takes this away from in the heat of the moment manslaughter to first-degree premeditated murder.
But does that mean he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars? On September 19th, 2018, just days before his murder trial is scheduled to begin, the former college athlete takes an insane gamble.
We never saw that coming.
It was unbelievable.
X-ray 12 just advised on police that she saw a subject running through the parking lot.
How did he escape?
I think I might have him down here. Stop! Just do it easy! Just stop!
As stories begin to unravel, detectives receive a breakthrough. Stay tuned as we return to the Fatal Attraction podcast.
In September of 2018, just 3 months after confessing to the murder of his girlfriend, Aniya Mack, Donovan Lewis is in jail awaiting trial on first-degree murder charges.
It was very likely that he'd end up sentenced to life in prison.
But will he make it to trial? It's the afternoon of September 19th, just days before his court date, and Donovan is outside in the jail's recreation yard.
They get 30 minutes a day, and the guards are watching.
Despite that, the former basketball star makes a sudden run for the fence.
He scales the fence, jumps the barbed wire, and gets out of the yard without a scratch.
I'm not aware of anybody going over that fence in the 30 years that I've practiced criminal law here in Kalamazoo until Donovan Lewis did it. It was pretty mind-blowing what he did. It was a spur-of-the-moment display of athleticism that nobody saw coming.
Law enforcement converge on the area around the jail as news of the escape spreads.
My office phone was ringing, my cell phone was ringing, I was receiving texts, Snapchats, and everything else.
However, just a half hour after he scaled the fence, Donovan's brief taste of freedom comes to an end.
I got him running. He's going towards the envelope.
He was spotted walking just down the street. We did end up catching him. He didn't even really resist when they made contact with him and arrested him.
He was captured after 33 minutes, but that was a knuckle-biting half hour there for everybody in law enforcement and for Aniya Mack's family.
Donovan's escape only adds to the prison time he's facing.
He's charged with felony escape. It's a mandatory 17 months. So he was sent to prison on that case before he was going to go to trial on his murder case.
Although in the end, a few days before proceedings are set to begin, Donovan's attorneys approach prosecutors about a possible plea deal.
He wanted to plead to second-degree murder, which is a murder without premeditation and gives him the opportunity to be heard by a parole board in 25 years.
Given the weight of the evidence, the prosecutors were reluctant to consider Donovan's proposal.
We were firm in our belief that this would be a conviction in first degree.
However, the prosecutors do reach out to Aniya's family.
We sat down and talked with them because I want their input. I didn't lose my daughter, my sister, my loved one in this case. They did.
It turns out that Aniya's family dreaded the prospect of going to trial.
They would be subject to the horrors of what happened to their loved one. They would have to be shown autopsy photos. They would have to be shown the photos of her in the suitcase.
Therefore, the family asks the prosecution to pursue the plea.
They just wanted the case to be done with. They wanted to begin healing. They had no issues with offering Donovan at least a chance to see the light outside of a prison cell someday. I respect the strength and kindness and grace that this family showed this man after what happened to their daughter. It still amazes me.
But Aniya's family will have their day in court.
It was all very powerful. They spoke very eloquently about the joy and vibrance of Aniya, the virtue and kindness and goodness, and they just wanted her memory to live on.
The prosecutor shares Aniya's mother's victim impact statement with the court.
She states, "Now, instead of hearing her voice again, I am writing about Donovan Lewis instead of making more plans with my daughter. I have been robbed of some of the best days of my life. I can't come to court because I don't want to relive her murder. I wonder, as he was beating her, did she know she was going to die? I'm not a person who seeks evil for evil. No, sir, but I do want justice."
When it's Donovan's turn to speak, he accepts responsibility for the crime.
Donovan Lewis was actually very remorseful. He said that he prays for the family. He explained that he was beyond sorry.
I don't have any reason not to just take that at face value, that he actually was truly remorseful for what he had done.
I believe him when he said at sentencing that he thinks about it every day.
And he'll have a long time to think about it too.
He was sentenced to 25 to 40 years.
But no amount of time and no apology can make up for what Donovan has done.
This family will never have her as part of it again. For many families, this is a loss that they'll never recover from.
And her family aren't the only ones who suffer in Aniya's absence.
Her death did leave a hole in our community.
The real tragedy in what Donnie did was he affected not only a family, not only a campus, not only friends, not only a city, but a generation. And I say that because I know that Aniya was predestined for great things.
The shocking murder of Aniya Mack is a tragic reminder of how uncontrolled jealousy and anger can lead to devastating consequences, leaving a gaping hole in the lives of loved ones. Coming up on the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast,
She was so independent. She was determined.
She worked 2 jobs.
But there was only one man for her.
She just was so in love with him.
It was her first relationship.
And unfortunately, it would also be her last.
Sir Walter Scott once said, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive." This quote can be applied to various situations, including the heart-wrenching story of Bria Isaac. What happened to Bria Isaac, and what happens when love turns fatal? Tune in to the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast. We will see you in the next episode.